as you get older, you naturally start to learn from previous mistakes and prior experiences, and you start to kind of channel yourself, or you start to redirect yourself into ways which you think, actually, I'm going to learn from this experience.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, episode 760, with my guest, Sabum Sam Pulfer. I am Jeremy Lesniak. I'm your host here for the show, founder of Whistlekick, where everything we do is in support of the traditional martial arts. If you want to see everything that we're doing to that end, well, visit whistlekick.com. It's our online home, and it's also the easiest way to find our products and services. If you use the code podcast15, you're going to save 15% on any of those products or services that you purchase at whistlekick.com. But if you want to keep going, maybe check out something in conjunction with this podcast, well, there's a whole different website, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. Show comes out twice a week, and the entire purpose behind everything we do, we're working hard to connect, educate, and entertain traditional martial artists throughout the world. If you want to help the show and the work that we do, there are a number of ways you can help. You can make a purchase, follow us on social media. We're at Whistlekick everywhere you could think of, or join our Patreon. Patreon.com, patreon.com/whistlekick. It's a place where we post exclusive content, and you can get in as little as $2 a month. And we're going to throw all kinds of great stuff at you in exchange for your willingness to do that. So go check it out. And I bet if you like this show, you'll like what we're doing at Patreon, and you'll find it worthwhile. And if you want the full list of all the ways you can help us, as well as a constantly rotating mix of kind of behind the scenes stuff from me and other members of the team, well, check out whistlekick.com/family. It's not linked. You got to type it in. I had a great time talking to Sam. We talked about his beginnings in Taekwondo and some cross training, and how his multifaceted approach to martial arts and to training has been such a benefit for him and really informed what he does, and I think more importantly, how he does it. So stick around, see what you think. Hey, Sam, welcome to Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio.
Hey, Jeremy, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, I'm happy to have you here. You know, audience, we just had a little bit of a pre-chat, so I know some of the places we're going to go, and it's stuff that we've not really talked much about over the years. And here we are, you know, what are we in our 8th year or something? So it's not common that we get subjects that are really new, or at least barely covered. And that's what I know we're going to get some of that today. So I'm excited.
Yeah, so definitely excited about the show. And as I say, thanks for having me on. And, you know, anything that I can say which may add to the martial arts community or help in any way, shape or form, or just give new ideas or a new perspective, you know, it'll be an honor as one martial artist to my fellow brethren, so to speak.
For sure. It is a community. It is a family, as we like to think of it.
No, most definitely. I agree.
Of course, we often almost always start in a rather predictable way, and we spider off from there. So I don't see any reason to change that today. How'd you get started?
For all the wrong reasons. Is the honest answer to that.
That is not a common answer. All right, I'm excited. Where are we going?
One of the things about my life is that there's never a black or a white. There's always like a story behind something. Like somebody would always say to me, how did that come around? Or how did you get this? How did you get that? And I'll look at them, I'll draw the breath, well, and then it'll be like, 20-minute spiel. But no, I mean, when I was a kid, I was growing up in the Middle East. My dad had a contract with Emirates Airlines, and I grew up in Dubai. And the whole culture of Dubai was very sports-based. It was very athletic. I remember at school in Dubai, we had like after-school clubs, and almost every single one was some sort of sport or sports-related. And when I was in Dubai, I was very heavily into squash. Me and my brother, and we were coached by a former European squash champion called Nikki Harradine. So, and we took that quite seriously. We were dedicated. We were training like three nights a week. And I think my parents both liked that. They're like, we've got active kids. We've got kids who are healthy. You were eating well as well. So they were kind of very happy that we weren't, okay, let's sit you in front of PlayStation, even though PlayStation was only just coming out at the time. Sure. PlayStation 1 or something. Yep. And then it got to late 90s, and my family moved to England. And I remember when we got back to England, my parents said to me, they're like, right, obviously you can't continue squash because we've left, but they're like, but you are not going to sit down in front of a TV on your weekends just watching garbage. They said, you will take up a sport. And in England, football, or as in the States you call it soccer, is like the national sport, but that has never gained my interest. So I was like, nah, that's out the window. So the parents dragged me reluctantly down to this sports hall in the local village, and we got talking to like the people who worked there, and this lady was showing us around, completely bored and disinterested. And she was like, yeah, so on Saturdays we do badminton, and on Sundays we do this, and Mondays we do that. And eventually she said apparently on one of the days they did Taekwondo. Now, I had no idea what Taekwondo was. I'd never heard of it in my life. To me, it sounded like a disease, or it sounded like some sort of, I don't know, some cuisine. Like, I'll order a dish of Taekwondo, medium rare. So it was just purely out of interest and curiosity. I said, Taekwondo? Yeah, I fancy giving that a go. And I remember my dad next to me, he turned to me with this raised eyebrow, and he was like, do you even know what that is? And I was like, pretending to good ideas. Oh yeah, I know Taekwondo. Yeah, I've seen it all over the TV. I had absolutely no idea. So anyway, they did, the lady was like, yeah, we do lessons on a Sunday morning. Come along wearing loose clothes. So I did. And it was an ITF school. And I was there for about a year. Sadly, my relationship with that school did actually break down. Very long story short, the instructor, I don't think, really had the best interest for students at heart. Sometimes he turned up, under the influence of certain substances, or he smelt at certain things. Other times he just didn't turn up at all. And obviously my parents were paying for this. And even my parents just like, look, we don't think this is right for like yourself or for us. So they're like, do you fancy finding another school? So I agreed to that actually, because I didn't really gel with this particular instructor at this ITF school. So I was more than happy to look elsewhere. So we went to the next neighboring town, and we found a WTF school. And as soon as I walked in, the instructor let me have like a free lesson and, show me the ropes. And at the end of it, he was like, how would you find it? I really enjoyed it. It seemed really cool. All the people there seemed to gel. There was a lot of friendliness. There's a lot of banter. So I said to my parents, I was like, yeah, obviously asking them, they're the ones paying for my tuition. But I was like, can I join? And they were like, if you're happy to do so, c'est la vie. So that was from that. And I was with that school from 98 or 99, I believe, up until 2006. My instructor then, he shut up shop in 2006 and he moved elsewhere. And since then, I've pretty much been like an independent body, so to speak. In 2006, went off to India. I coached a team in India. I did my gap year out there, and I stayed at like a little rural boarding school in the middle of Rajasthan. And I was teaching like the kids out there how to do Taekwondo and other martial arts. Came back to England the following year, and I said, right, I want to start up my own school. So I started up my own school 2007, and it was, I could have called it any name. It could have been like Sam's Taekwondo. It could have been Phoenix Taekwondo, something like conventional, The name I went for was Shiva Soviet. And
say that again?
It's as bad as it sounds. Shiva Soviet.
Soviet, like SOVIET, like Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Wow, you like making things harder for yourself.
Well,
hey, keep going.
That came around. This turns into quite a dark story in itself, actually. But no, Shiva, I'll break those down. Shiva in Hindu mythology or the Hindu religion is the god of construction. And that, I think the name kind of came from when I was living in India, like a month or so prior. I was in a very Hindu-based area, so there's lots of Hindu temples dedicated to Shiva. So that must have subconsciously had a bit of a rub-on effect.
Yeah.
But Soviet Union, that literally came around. I thought Soviet just sounds like a cool name. And I remember reading a book about Indian history, which is actually on my bookshelf right there. And it came across actually with the names Shiva and Soviet Union in one sentence. And my mind, not necessarily working to conventional lines, looked at this sentence for Shiva and Soviet. And I thought, wow, that would be such a cool name for like a punk band or a heavy metal band or something.
Yes.
So, yeah. So I can't play an instrument. I can play air guitar, but badly.
You and me both.
It's a good instrument.
It is.
So I said to myself, right, I'll call the team Shiva Soviet. And yeah, we got so much interest. I don't know if it's the right kind of interest. I mean, I was 19 at the time, and a lot of my students were like 18, 19, 20, 21. The classes were really crushed up. I could only afford a tiny little sports hall, which had an unsanitized floor, industrial walls, metal pylons kind of like sticking across the walls, girders across the roof. It was almost like something from Rocky, or like an exaggerated Rocky. You walk in there and it's just like filthy, and I'm surprised I didn't get like a sepsis or something from there. But yeah, all the students were very sort of like young testosterone. A lot of our syllabus was sparring based, and it was kind of bad in retrospect. It was really bad because actually we were sparring like full contact sparring with no protective gear at all. And I might as well just call it like Sam's boxing, Friday night boxing, or something like Fight Club or something like that. And yeah, that was the start of Shiva Soviet. But I think in life, what I've kind of learned is that as you get older, you naturally start to learn from previous mistakes and prior experiences, and you start to kind of channel yourself, or you start to redirect yourself into ways which you think, actually, I'm going to learn from this experience, take it forward, but I'm not going to repeat those same mistakes. And Shiva Soviet, yeah, we had I did a video about it once actually on my YouTube channel. To say it was a checkered history would probably be giving it a bit of like an icing sugar coating on it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't run a school like I would Shiva Soviet now, by no stretch. But anyway, Shiva Soviet closed down in 2009. I then opened up another outlet called Gemini Martial Arts Team, which is almost the polar opposite of Shiva, because Gemini, I said to myself, right, I don't want to have a dojo or a dojang. Gemini is purely going to exist just for competitions. So we're not even going to really exist as an outfit until a competition comes on. Then I will ask certain people if they want to be part of Gemini and go to this competition. And that's how it was for many years. But gradually the last, I'd say, 10 years or so, Gemini has now kind of like cemented itself a bit more solidly. We've got like a solid team base. We train a lot more maturely than what I used to do in Shiva Soviet. And yeah, we've just done a lot of competition since then. We've done world championships. We've done internationals. We've been off to Finland. We did a competition in Disneyland Paris back in 2010. Some guy got dressed up as Mickey Mouse and got punched in the face, if I remember. Like I said, there's always a strange story behind all this stuff. And quite recently, actually last month, as part of Gemini, actually, we went on a cruise to the Canary Islands. And we actually did a competition on the cruise ship itself. So we actually did a competition like in the middle of the ocean.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was a unique experience. And stuff like that. I mean, we've done a lot of charity events with Gemini as well. We did the largest Taekwondo display in the world, which was in October 2016. So it's definitely kind of combining a lot of like humanitarian stuff with the martial arts itself. So yeah, that has been my martial arts career to date in a Reader's Digest version.
Yeah. I want to go way, way back. You said something that I'm finding fascinating. Here you are, you're quite young, and you decide to join a Taekwondo class without knowing what Taekwondo is. I mean, that's interesting. I think it probably says something about you and your personality, just, being perhaps a bit of a contrarian, which the name of your first school also would suggest. But what I find even more interesting is that after a year or so at your first school, you had such a positive relationship with martial arts, despite not having a positive relationship with your instructor. And for most people, their first go in a martial art, those two are not separate.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right, because as I explained before we went live, I'm studying psychology, and my career goal is to actually become a therapist, a CBT counselor. And one of the things that I learned from my degree was that a successful therapist-client relationship will be based on how well the client and the therapist gel. So that is true with martial arts, because when you do martial arts, you're getting close physically to your instructor. And I was going to use the word intimate, but I believe if I use the word intimate, that might be misunderstood. However, at the risk of sounding sexual, with your instructor, you're learning a lot of like self-defense moves. So there'll be a lot of like close contact. There'll be a lot of touching.
It certainly is an intimate relationship. People are within your personal space. They're putting hands on you in a way that generally doesn't happen outside of a romantic relationship or martial arts. I mean, most people are not touched that closely in anything but one of those two scenarios. So I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. I mean, you won't go up to like somebody in the street and start like putting your hands all over them and stuff. You'll be, oh, dude, what the hell are you doing? Get off me.
In that context, it's called assault, and you get arrested.
So if you don't gel with your instructor and you're getting into this close proximity with them and you don't gel, then it's going to be like pulling teeth. And yes, you're right. A lot of people, I believe, from my experience, from what I've seen, they will leave a martial arts school not because they dislike the martial art, not because they dislike the activity, not because they necessarily dislike the other students, but it's because they just don't get on with the instructor. And my relationship with martial arts has been, in my mind, one side of my yin yang, and my relationship with instructors has actually been the other side of my yin yang. Martial arts, and not just Taekwondo in particular, because I have dabbled in other martial arts as well. In 2011, I became heavily involved in Kyokushin, to the point where I trained in nothing but Kyokushin for probably about two years solid. But my relationship with martial arts, it's been my lifeline. It's been there to help me through my difficult teenage years when I'm going through puberty, and I can sit down in college and all I can think about are women's lumps and bumps who are sitting next to me. So, but then also times when, if I've had things on my mind, I'll go off and do my videos for my YouTube channel and just enjoy the experience, enjoy the competitions. To date, I've done over 100 competitions, purely because I enjoyed them so much. And I didn't think anything of going to all these places, these random places like Finland or Albania or India or Sri Lanka, and competing out there. To me, it just, people be like, wow, why are you doing that? And I just be like, it's just what I do. So martial arts in general has been good for me. It's been almost like a form of therapy, a creative therapy. And there have been times when I've really struggled in life. I mean, I suffer from depression and anxiety, but martial arts has really sort of helped with that. It's really sort of grounded me. It's made me focus on the physiological, biological sense, but it's also just given me that sense of enjoyment, of the sense of, I'm just practicing martial arts because, it's not to beat anybody up. It's not to, borderline kill somebody in a sparring ring. It's just because I want to do it. However, on the other side of the coin, with relationships with instructors, truth be told, I mean, a lot of my relationships with instructors have been quite, I wouldn't say volatile. That's not the right word to use, but a lot of the time we've not really met eye to eye on things. And I think a lot of that is because I'm a very questioning individual. And again, this comes from the degree. When I was doing my degree, or when I'm doing my degree, one of the things I'm taught as a social psychologist or a social scientist is to always question, critically assess, critically analyze. And that's how you learn. I believe it was Bruce Lee who once said that I respect faith, but doubt is what gives you an education. So if anything comes my way on like a piece of paper, or somebody says, this is how you do X, I will quite often look and be like, oh yeah, but there could be another way of doing this. And I think I wasn't doing any of this stuff. I'll just reiterate actually that I wasn't doing any of this questioning to be belligerent. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I wasn't trying to be like condescending in any way, shape, or form. But that was just me being quite innately curious about things. And I believe a lot of instructors who I actually trained under maybe had quite a bit of like a hard time looking at it from that perspective. I've trained with some instructors who are very laid back, and they actually welcome that approach. They're like, yes, feel free to question my approach, because what I'm teaching you may not necessarily be the best approach for you. So you have to adapt it to your own approach. Then I've trained with some other instructors who are very sort of deontological in the sense that they like rules. Mm. And if you start questioning those, they're like, well, why are you questioning me? You're the one who's here to learn. You're paying me to teach you. So you shut up and listen. But upon saying that, all the instructors I've had, even the first instructor who I didn't really gel with, I'm thankful for what they've been able to teach me. And I believe there's a difference between liking somebody and respecting somebody. You could like somebody, but not necessarily have much respect for them. You could respect somebody, but not necessarily like them.
I agree.
And I found from my experience, most of the people who I respect, I'm talking like genuinely, deeply respect, I don't really like them as people, but I like maybe what they stand for. I like their values. I like their approach, their resilience. I like what they can offer. And I think my Kyokushin instructor was kind of like a prime example of that. Mm. He didn't necessarily like my social attitude to life, or how I viewed life. I didn't necessarily like some things that he did, but at the same time, he was phenomenal at Kyokushin. And I learned so much from him. I mean, he taught me very basic things, but the basic things he taught worked. And I noticed a huge difference. As soon as he started teaching me Kyokushin, I could see the difference between what he was teaching and, my first Taekwondo instructor. I was like, wow, this is so different. But the Kyokushin instructor's understanding of Kyokushin and the Japanese philosophy behind it, and the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen especially, was of constant improvement, was astronomical. And that really almost kind of like opened up another set of eyes for me of how to look at martial arts. However, I think some of that conflict or disagreement's good. Obviously not too much, because then you have a complete breakdown. Right. But if you have a little bit of friction or a little bit of a disagreement, it's healthy, because debate is healthy. That's how we learn. Both sides learn.
I agree.
If you get an instructor who says jump and the student says how high, all you're really doing then is just creating like a robotic drone who's just going to give you blind obedience and blind servitude. But you as an instructor, do you honestly want that? Because they're only going to go so far. However, if you did kind of encourage maybe like a yes question, analyze, assess, dissect, add your own bits in, then that's creative. That's constructionism. Yeah. And I believe that can only come around with a little bit of a friction. As I said, not friction to cause a breakdown, but friction enough to cause a creation to develop.
Right. Friction creates heat, right? Most chemical reactions require at least a bit of heat, something beyond, room temperature. I want to, you said a few things that I kind of want to respond to. The first one, something I've been thinking in the back of my head as you've been talking, this idea of an instructor who doesn't permit questions in any context. And obviously there are appropriate and inappropriate times to question someone. I don't think you're suggesting that anytime any question is appropriate, that they can have a time and a place. But if we think about a school where questioning, because questioning leads to understanding. If we can never ask those questions, then the best students in that school can never be as good as the instructor. Yeah. That instructor has a level of understanding that they are not passing on. Okay, and I just wanted to put that out there. You're nodding your head, so I know we're in agreement there, but just something for the audience. And I want to bear with me, a couple other things. I want to come back and talk about this contrast with Kyokushin and Taekwondo, because that's fascinating to me. But first, I want to ask you, you posed a rather significant philosophical question, so I'm going to kind of put you on the spot with it. Would you rather be liked or respected?
Respected.
Oh, you didn't even hesitate. Okay, you've thought about this. Why?
I've been in the position of both positions. I've been in my day-to-day working life. I work in a mental health unit, and I'm actually a deputy manager at a mental health unit. And with that position entails a certain amount of responsibility. And if you're going to be respected, you have to understand that you are going to make some decisions which are going to be very unpopular. You're going to understand that people are going to talk about you behind your back. They're going to slate you off. They're going to trash talk you. You know, I've never heard people actually do that behind my back, but I'm sure they do. You know, that's just the nature of the deputy manager and other workers. And I look at that and think, but that comes with the responsibility. And you can read a situation with your heart, or you can read a situation with your head. And if you read a situation with your heart all the time, you're going to become over emotional. You're going to let those little criticisms get to you. You're going to think, oh my God, you know, nobody likes me. Nobody's going to put me on their Christmas list, or I'm not going to be invited to birthdays, or to go to the pub and have a pint. But if you read it with your head, you can say, yes, I know they're not necessarily agreeing with what I want to do at this moment. However, I know the decision that I'm making is going to be in the best interests of them. And I know it's going to be in the best interests of the project that you're running. And I've relating this to martial arts. I've trained with some people who, as an example, I walked into a boxing gym some time ago, and I could immediately see all the students there were battle hardened. You know, they had, sounds pugilistic to say this, but they had squash noses. You know, you could see the cauliflower ears, and you know, you could see they'd done sparring time. And I went toe to toe with these guys in the boxing gym, and I was severely out of shape. And I could see they started to go a little bit softer on me. However, at the same time, I could see that they weren't kind of, I want to say treating me as one of their own, because I was an outsider. I was from the out group, but I could see they were kind of like maybe having a little bit of sympathy, I think. So they were never like malicious to me. They were never saying things like, oh, you know, come on, you can do better. Nothing like that. They were very encouraging, on the contrary. But I could just see that they were kind of like looking at me like to the side of their eyes, kind of thinking, oh, you know, come on, this guy's not that good. However, I remember then learning from that experience. The following year, I went to a martial arts camp that we had in the south of England. And it was all these Japanese styles got there. We had like Bujutsu, we had various forms of Kendo or Kenjutsu, Kyokushin was there. And I remembered learning these experiences at this boxing gym. And I thought to myself, I'm going to volunteer to be an uki or a partner to every single demonstration which is going to happen at this event. And I said, I'll probably get bashed up. I'll probably be bruised ribs. I'll be probably vomiting by the end of it. But I was like, but I'm going to show that spirit. I'm going to actually earn that respect. And I did exactly that. I mean, I was thrown to the floor countless times. I was put into various locks. Parts of my body were being stretched on like this human rack. Parts of my body I didn't even know existed. And it's like the night staggering back to my tent. All the kids and everybody else was like running back to their tents. And I was basically almost hobbling to my tent, thinking to myself like, you know, wow, you know, I didn't know I had like a, you know, an extra nose sticking out of my forehead because it was all bashed up. But, and the end of it was like a 3-day course. At the end of it, we did like 4 hours worth of full contact sparring. And some of these guys doing this full contact sparring, they were low graded, but they were big. They were built like, you know, grizzly bears. They were mammoths. And I remember like some of the guys, I was throwing all I had at them. And, you know, they were barely moving. They just do like, I don't know, 1-2 thigh kick. Hurt like hell. But I remember just looking and thinking, no, I'm not gonna go down. I'm not gonna say stop. I'm not gonna give you the satisfaction, basically. However, at the end, when this whole thing was finished, the people who were running it, actually, they came up to me and just said, look, you know, we'd like you to be an honorary instructor. in our organization was like, we were highly impressed with what you've done. You showed like true Japanese, the equivalent of Japanese spirit. So like, we were really impressed. And that's all they really said. I mean, they didn't go overboard, but reading between the lines, I remember looking and thinking, that's all that I needed. So it wasn't people kind of like going easy anymore. It wasn't people kind of thinking, oh, Sam's not too good, so we're not going to try bashing him up. I looked at it and thought, they're trying to bash me up because they know I can take it. So I believe in that kind of instance, I actually earned the respect. So yeah, when it comes down to whether I want to be liked or respected, I'd much rather be respected.
Right. That's a solid, a sound answer. I don't know what I think I want to be respected, but I'm going to have to spend some time thinking on this one. So let's go back to Kyokushin and really what got you to Kyokushin? Because while there's certainly similarity between ITF and Kyokushin, the way those classes generally run, what is focused on, in my experience, is quite different. So how did you get from A to B?
You're right. I mean, the main difference which I found, excuse me, the main difference which I found was the conditioning. Not so much my experience with the ITF, but when I did WTF, we did quite literally no conditioning. A lot of the Taekwondo class format, if I remember correctly, it will start off with a warm up. We'd then go into basics. We'd then do some pad work, kicking the pads, but all the pad stuff was head height. That we'd have people holding these paddles and they'd be holding them like as high as you can get, and you had to jump as high as a giraffe's neck to be able to kick them. And then the class would generally end with either some Poomsae, the equivalent of kata, or some self-defense. When I did the Kyokushin, the format which I experienced generally followed almost the same format. It was like a warm-up, basics, very basic, then the rest of it was sparring. So in the Kyokushin lessons of, say, 2 hours long, it'll be about 15-minute warm-up, 15-minute basics, then the rest will be sparring. So my experience of Kyokushin was heavily based more on sparring. And from my experience, that's why, of course, this is a generalization. Of course, I know there's always going to be an exception to the generalization, but that's what makes Kyokushin fighters so formidable, because they spend so much time focused primarily on sparring, and you fight the way you train. And a lot of the sparring as well, or even the basics, involved conditioning. So you get two partners coming up to each other, and one would stand there and the other one would just be blitzing into the stomach for punches, or they'd be kicking the thighs, slapping the inside of the thigh, punching into the shoulders, going up underneath the ribs. And the psychology of that was the fact that what's going to happen to you in a fight? You're going to get hit. But if you're training and all you're doing in your training is being hit, you're gradually learning to psychologically overcome your, oh my God, I'm going to get hit reflex. And what I learned from Kyokushin is that the more conditioning that I did, the more I actually then began to almost want my opponent to hit me when it came to sparring. Because I was thinking to myself, look, how hard can you hit? Because in the drills, in the training, I've been hit pretty hard. Can you hit as hard? I felt almost kind of like a bit of a Rambo kind of guy, kind of thinking like, come on, give it to me, at the risk of sounding arrogant, which it wasn't. I was just almost wanting to test myself. Whereas what I found with Taekwondo is that my experience of Taekwondo, and I believe generally Taekwondo across the board, especially the Olympic version, there is no conditioning. And it's sad, but there doesn't need to be, because if you watch the Olympics, they're wearing body armor all the time. And the Olympic fighting is not based on, it used to be based on let's KO you, whereas now it's based on let's score points. So you'll get people coming in and all they need to do is really tap your body armor for the electronic sensor to go, oh yeah, I felt pressure. Yeah, that's a point. And that's all they're really taught. Whereas the Kyokushin, if you watch the Kyokushin fighters in their competitions, on their kumite, the only guards they wear are groin guards. I've seen some wear gum shields, and I believe shin guards, and that's all they have. But the idea of the Kyokushin Kumite is to actually knock your opponent down or to knock them out. So, of course, if the end game is going to be different, you're going to be training for different reasons and fighting for different reasons and using different tactics. And I believe as well that's why you can see a lot of YouTube videos actually when a lot of Taekwondo fighters actually get hammered, for want of a better word. And I think that's purely not necessarily a reflection of bad fighter, but it's just because they're not ready or expecting to fight in necessarily a Kyokushin full contact way.
Rules will dictate how the competition goes, which will dictate how the training goes.
Yeah.
You know, I would imagine that even a high level Kyokushin fighter would get demolished in Olympic Taekwondo sparring.
Yeah.
And vice versa, because they are, well, a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick, more or less. The way those are implemented is, or at least can be, dramatically different. That's what you're talking about. And I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it's true, because I think before karate went into the Olympics, and again, I was actually speaking to the Kyokushin guys who I was training with at the time. They were saying that they knew a lot of karate fighters who wanted to go into the Olympics, but as karate hadn't been accepted at this stage, a lot of them were just transitioning over to Taekwondo schools. And apparently all the Taekwondo instructors were just saying to them is like, look, just kick. So they were just learning how to kick above the waist and not kick into the thighs or use their hands as much. So yeah, the rules will definitely dictate. And I think as well, like one of the saving graces I think with Taekwondo is that it's always advancing and evolving over time. And the Taekwondo you get in today's Olympics is not the same Taekwondo you got, say, 20 years ago. The body armor back 20 years ago was thin. So even if you got like a back kick into the body armor, you still felt it. Whereas now it's a lot more chunky. But even if you just minutely change the rules of a Taekwondo competition, it can change the whole style.
So I want to poke at what you're saying a little bit, because you have up until now been separating WTF, now WT, and ITF. And this is a place where I think that separation is critically important.
In regards to...
You're talking about changes and evolution and how the competitive focus has led to changes in training and in understanding of the art. In my experience, ITF is not changing. It is not evolving in the way that WT is.
Only having minute experience with ITF to begin with, I don't necessarily feel as though I can comment so much about the changes in ITF. But from what experience I have with ITF is that I know that ITF is very much more in terms of hand techniques. One of the last competitions I did actually in a place called Margate in England actually was an ITF competition. And the worst injury I got actually was a bloody nose, because the guy came over the top of my guard, Superman punch, hit me straight there, and blood just went everywhere. But with the Taekwondo changing itself, I mean, if you look at a style like, I don't know if you've heard it, Pro Taekwondo.
No.
It was something, it was quite popular in like the late 90s, and it was a WTF formatted competition. They were WTF do box, all the actual stylistic kicks they were doing were very much WTF. However, there was no body armor, there was hardly any guards or gum shields, and it wasn't based on points. It was basically meant to, almost like a war of attrition. You wore your opponent down, aiming for a KO. And seeing those pro TKD fighters spar on those competitions was different to how you saw the Olympics.
Yeah.
The tactics were changing. There was a lot more emphasis on like the heavy kicks, like jumping back kicks. A lot more combinations with hands as well. They'll be like coming in closer, they'll be using their hands a lot to the sternum, and then trying to go for a head height roundhouse kick as your opponent backed off. So very much so, like, I think even tweaking a few rules here and there will have a long-term effect and actually change the whole training strategies and methods which are used. But ITF Taekwondo, I mean, in some ways, I kind of look at the sparring between WTF and ITF and actually think maybe it should actually be considered a different martial art, because both styles use different methods. Both styles emphasize different tactics and strategies.
I see them as dramatically different in training and philosophy, in competition forms. I mean, they're I don't know how well you know the lineage, the history of Taekwondo. Have you ever read A Killing Art by Alex Gillis?
I've not, but I have heard of it.
I would strongly encourage you to read it. It is a fascinating read.
One thing actually you mentioned interesting about the actual forms as well, or the tool in ITF. Mm-hmm. Again, performed completely different to WTF Poomsae. Yeah. Sine wave being one of them. The actual techniques themselves, very different. I found with ITF, watching their tools and their forms, their patterns, there's a lot more, generally, a lot more different techniques and a lot more variety as well. Mm-hmm. Much longer.
I agree with that.
Much longer in performance as well. I remember actually once I taught myself Samil. I was competing at a world championships and I thought, well, I'm competing in world championships. I'll teach myself Samil because my name's Sam, no ego there at all.
None.
But I remember teaching myself the sine wave and learning these new moves. And I was like, wow, I've been in martial arts or Taekwondo for so many years and I've never seen this technique before. And it was fascinating, but even the philosophical concepts behind the ITF forms, a lot of them were based on patriotism, nationalism, historical figures like Dangun, Hwarang, mm-hmm. and Yulsin as well, named after the Korean admiral. And then I was thinking, okay, so how can I compare this to the WTF forms, and what do they represent? And the WTF forms, they have their own philosophy, but they seem to be more not so much specific to Korea in specific.
You've got it. I'm gonna all but beg of you to read the book, and then I want to hear your thoughts, because I think it's gonna give you some context to these differences that I didn't know about until we had Alex was on the show years ago, and it is the most often mentioned book on this show because it provides context in a way that is so dramatic that Alex received death threats.
Really?
Yes. Well, I don't want to spoil it. You're gonna you think you know what a martial arts book is. You may not put this one down. This thing it is fascinating. And just a shout to any of the listeners out there, if you've not, regardless of whether you train Taekwondo, if you've not read this book there is more about what martial arts is today in the world contained in this one book than any other book, or probably any other 10 books you could read.
I'll definitely put that down on my light bedtime reading. I mean, I'm currently reading this book at the moment, so maybe I'll read it after this.
Mad or Bad: A Critical Approach to Counseling and Forensic Psychology. Ooh. Okay.
It's heavy reading.
I'm inferring from the title, the premise is whether or not the crime committed was one out of anger or the person was just suffered from bad character.
Essentially, it's trying to decipher whether criminals commit crime. This is a lot of criminology and social psychology coming here, but do criminals commit crime because they are inherently bad or mm-hmm. evil or morally impermissible, or is it because they might have just had a bad upbringing?
There was a moment.
There was a moment. They're a victim of social circumstance more than being intrinsically bad.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like I said, it's behind my laptop. There's a whole load of weird and wonderful 1984, and then we've got Madness and Civilization, and I think there's Tintin down there or something.
Awesome. Whenever we talk to people who spend a bunch of time in multiple styles, one of my favorite questions: what did you bring from Taekwondo into your time in Kyokushin? What did you bring from Kyokushin into your time in Taekwondo? And especially if you're competing and you're coaching others in competition, if I've got my timeline right, you're able to bring all that stuff into over the last few years as you're coaching people.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's one of the beauties I've always found about martial arts is that there's something in every single style which you can use to complement another style. And like when I was doing like WTF Taekwondo doesn't put much emphasis on hands. So when I did Kyokushin, a very strong focus then went onto the hands and getting in close and being able to use very short, sharp jabbing punches to areas of the body which really did hurt. What I was able to bring from Kyokushin into Taekwondo was a lot of the conditioning aspects. I remember once a Taekwondo friend of mine asked me if I wanted to run her class. She was unable to do it, so she said, would I mind doing it? So yeah, I'd be honored. And I remember teaching some Kyokushin in the lesson. I just said, look, I'm going to teach you something a little bit different. Here's some Kyokushin karate. And yeah, it was teaching stuff like the outside fly kicks, stuff like Gedamoshi geris, stuff like this, which they hadn't had exposure to. So they seemed to enjoy it. And I like to think that maybe they kind of took something away, which they hadn't been exposed to before. So again, it was helping them develop and look at maybe martial arts in a different aspect. What I was able to bring from Taekwondo to Kyokushin, I'd say definitely in terms of quick combination kicks. And again, I don't say that with any like disparaging reference to Kyokushin, because Kyokushin has speed. Kyokushin does have a lot of ferocity and aggression. But I remember when I did my first Taekwondo spar against this Kyokushin guy, I was able to let fire a lot of combinations. I mean, I was much younger than I am at the time. I could do these like double roundhouse kicks, one of which went to his thigh. So he went to do a leg check. I then jumped up and able to land a roundhouse kick to the side of his head. And he hadn't been exposed to these double roundhouses before. Stuff like tornado kicks, stuff like a spinning hook kick, which a spinning hook kick is in Kyokushin, but it's not as predominant or as regular as you get in Taekwondo.
Yeah.
So I was able to include a lot of these sorts of aspects, like quick fire kicking, combination kicking, a lot more of like the bouncy footwork. Whereas a lot of the Kyokushin guys who I trained with, because of their size, their build of them, they much preferred to say, right, I'm going to march towards you and I'm going to grind you down with strikes. They didn't necessarily favor okay, let's have mobility. And again, I appreciate every single fighter is different and some fighters would advocate different things, but this was the guys who I trained with, so speaking from my experience. But I like to think I actually saw one of these Kyokushin instructors later on sparring another guy, and he was actually using some of these Taekwondo techniques, or he was trying to use them. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but at least I'm looking for, actually fair play to him for at least trying, and I'm not going to blame him for trying that at all. It's like, he obviously saw something which he liked, wants to experiment with, and wants to see how it goes. And I'm never going to blame somebody for wanting to do that. So yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities for crossover with different styles. And all I'd say to anybody, I'd always encourage cross training. All the students I've had, Gemini, Shiva Soviet, I always encourage cross training. And I'd say really the only thing you've really got to lose is just your prejudice. And one thing which has always got me in the martial arts world is when people have this sort of reluctance to learn from other styles, or they tend to believe that the style they do is the true style, or that what they're doing is the be all end all. And you see them in YouTube comments, basically the keyboard warriors, like, X and X style is the best, or, ABC style is amazing. Your style is rubbish. And that's always kind of like got under my skin a little bit. And I thought to myself, well, you're just worshipping the name. You're not worshipping, or you're not really paying attention to the technique or strategy. It's just because somebody's got a name or a fancy name that is making you put this sort of like deification on it. So I've always said, always cross train if you can. Be honest about your arts as well. Be honest about strengths. Be honest about the challenges or the weaknesses, because a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. But if you can identify those weaknesses and then say, okay, so what can we do to remedy this? Let's take something from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and add it to our Muay Thai repertoire, or something from our Wing Chun syllabus and add something else to that. Right. I'd always encourage that.
I find that there's a inverse relationship between how loudly someone criticizes others on the internet and how much skill they have. The louder folks, took 4 classes 6 years ago. The silent ones are the ones that you've got to watch out for, which interestingly enough correlates with some of the strongest advice I ever received. If there's ever a fight happening, if you end up at a bar and, there's a couple groups fighting, the last person you want to be around is the one that's perfectly calm. They're the one that's going to be the most dangerous. I also think cross-training is incredibly valuable. And if nothing else, let's take that example of the Kyokushin fighter experimenting with some Taekwondo techniques. Maybe they would almost never work in a competition. Maybe they're completely outside the curriculum they're being taught. Maybe they don't even find them enjoyable, but they're going to have a better understanding of the random person such as yourself that shows up to class and is now throwing things that they've never seen before, and they're taken to task. Even if it's not for your own usage, it's for your own understanding. And I think that is critical. In my mind, a diverse martial artist is a better martial artist.
No, I completely second that, most totally. Incidentally, actually, at the beginning of the year, on my YouTube channel, I put out a friendly invite to my subscribers and said, would anybody like to come and roll with me down at my gym? And one young man did. Cool. And it was friendly. I mean, I was off the bat. I was like, this is not going to be an ego contest. It's going to be sharing experiences. Yeah. And I'll buy you a beer at the end of it. And we didn't get time to have a beer. we gobbled up a lot of our time actually talking about Star Wars.
Even better.
Yeah, but no, he came down and got in our gym, and we had the radio playing in the background. It was like Spice Girls or something. My favorite band's Iron Maiden, but we had Spice Girls on. And he came from a predominantly a Tai Chi background. And a lot of people could say, okay, Tai Chi, is it a martial art or is it an exercise with martial techniques? But this individual, he was able to use Tai Chi concepts with a lot of Chinese related material as well. He used a lot of Bong Sao from Wing Chun when I tried to go for strikes. He combined it a lot with Muay Thai as well. He landed quite a few thigh kicks. He was able to use question mark kick as well. He was well versed in a whole different variety. But just from sparring him for about half an hour in this gym, it was such an eye opener for me, because I was seeing the different tactics and strategies he was using, and I was thinking to myself, I can see the value of that. And he I mean, as an example, he was doing stuff like, as we're sparring, his guard came really wide out and exposed to the side. And the first time he did that, he had this expression on his face, which was almost like a puppy dog kind of wide-eyed, lazy, goofy kind of expression. And I thought, oh, right, perfect opportunity. So I went to go and strike in. Immediately, he just trapped my arm, came in, just punched me straight in the face. And I immediately knew, I was like, oh God, I'm such a sucker. It's like, he was planning that. He was basically he wanted to make himself look really vulnerable for him to be able to come and do that. I learned quick, very, very quick. But that in itself, and I then began thinking about it afterwards. I was like, I'd like to try that technique one day and see how it works. I mean, it might not work, but it's an idea for me to play around with. It's like a seed which has been planted. But I like to think that maybe he took some things away as well from what I was doing too. Yeah. But I always value cross training, because if you get some people who, say as an example, Taekwondo, just because we've been talking a lot about Taekwondo, if you get a Taekwondo sparrer who wants to spar up against another Taekwondo guy, you're going to be using the same skills that you're used to, and you're going to be expecting the same skills in return. However, if you get a Taekwondo guy against, say, Xing Yi, as an example, two completely different styles. So they'll both be using techniques and strategies and methods which neither are probably going to be used to or recognize. So that's when you start seeing a real sort of adaptation and modification of their respective skills, which I think is instrumental in being able to build a more, not just a complete fighter, but actually a martial artist as well. It's really, I've always found when you go outside of your comfort zone, that's when you really learn. You know, there's an old saying of that a boat is safest when it's in harbor, but a boat is not designed to stay in harbor. It has to go into a stormy sea. But that's how it gets from one end of the ocean to the other.
Yeah.
Same with martial artists.
You can't learn doing the same stuff over and over in the same ways. You've got to branch out. And that example you gave of sparring with someone, it's honestly those situations where it's friendly. It's not rooted in competition. It's rooted in sharing. Those are the points where I have learned the absolute most.
Yeah. And I mean, there's many things actually I could take away from this specific sparring episode in particular. As I said beforehand, when I put this invitation out, at first I had some reservations because I was thinking, this is YouTube.
Right.
And, yeah, enough said. But
the jerks aren't going to show up because the jerks are the ones with the least amount of training and they know you're going to take them to task.
The jerks are ones that just leave comments like, I could take you. Then you click on their profile and you see they've got they opened up their channel 4 years ago and they've got no subscribers and no picture and no uploads.
Exactly.
But admittedly, I did have reservations. I think, okay, even if it was somebody, not necessarily a jerk, but somebody who might have been thinking, this is an excuse to come down and, you'll be picking your teeth out your feces for a week. but I said to myself, no, because I'm going to sift through it. I'm going to vet this kind of stuff. And if I get any of that kind of stuff as a response, I'm just going to say, look, thanks, but no thanks. And this young man, when he messaged me, he actually, he was really polite. He was like, I've just seen your advert and, I'll be interested, and he was like, can I ask if it's a serious thing? So we got talking on Facebook and we got to know a little bit about each other. We added each other as friends and, I would say doing background research on him, I was looking at his profile and seeing kind of what he was, and I'm sure he was doing the same to me. But, he genuinely seemed like a nice guy. So when we did meet up at this place, he was 6'2". So, he was...
How tall are you?
6 foot.
Okay.
But, it's weird. I'm used to little old ladies come up to me in supermarkets saying, oh, could you pick that off the top shelf? Yeah, certainly. Anything else you like, madam? Yeah. But, this guy, he got out of his car and he was like, oh, hi. And he was like this big towering giant. And I was just thinking, wow, he's big. But again, his persona, his whole approach, how he presented was very, very humble. He always had this big sort of friendly smile on. I got the impression though he was a very straight talking guy. So we went in there and so talked about Star Wars for a bit, got the music going, and we just rolled. But it was good because as we were sparring along as well, we were kind of offering constructive criticism as we were going along. And I remember at the end of the whole event, I actually did a video onto my YouTube channel, basically as my analysis of how I think it went. And I remember saying that it takes something for two fully grown men who should know better, who've never met, to get into this hot, sweaty gym, to then punch and kick each other and be absolutely fine. And, not have any malice, not have any sort of, oh, you punched me, so I'm going to punch you back harder. None of that whatsoever. He was hitting hard, I was hitting hard, but it never went to overboard. It was never like, right, I'm going to get you back on. Nothing like that.
And the intent was in the right place. The intent was not to harm. The intent was to share and to learn and enjoy.
Yeah. And quite often as well, actually, in sparring, whenever I get hit, I always say to myself, don't hold anything against the guy who's hit you, because he's simply doing what he's there to do.
Yeah.
Instead, ask myself, why did I get hit?
Right.
So that's kind of, I'm very introspective in that sort of aspect. And even at the end, once I uploaded this analysis video, and this young man kind of got back to me. He was like, just want to say, thank you so much for this opportunity. You had really good fun, and hopefully we can do this again in the future. And yeah, I mean, it like I said, it was just such a nice experience, both in terms of the martial arts content, learning from the martial arts, but also being able to actually meet somebody like this who had the same sort of thought process as myself, who didn't take anything to heart, didn't harbor any grudges, and just rolled with it. It's so nice to actually be able to train with somebody like that. And when you train with somebody like that, that's when you genuinely learn. Instead of thinking about, I got really beat up the other night, you're actually thinking, okay, that was a good learning experience. What did I learn from it? What can I take forward? What needs work on? Very much, yeah. Those kind of experiences, I think, are amazing, to be honest.
Completely agree. So tell folks a little bit more about your YouTube channel and where they can find it.
Yeah, my YouTube channel, it's Gemini-TKD-Sam. It's been up on YouTube for the last 2 years, actually. And that it's interesting itself. Like I said, there's always a story behind something. This channel came around. It was actually, again, it was a form of therapy. As I mentioned earlier, my professional background is with mental health and psychiatry and psychology. And I was working in a mental health unit, and very challenging behaviors. I was working with people with personality disorders, schizophrenic schizophrenia, emotionally unstable personality disorder, narcissism, a lot of heavy duty mental health. And it got to about the middle of 2020, and I felt myself actually burning out. I'm not going to talk about all the ins and outs of my working life, but I was working excessively, and I found myself becoming very, very jaded, very, very burnt out, quite lackluster as well. And I recognized this in myself. And I said to myself, right, okay, take some time out and find something that you enjoy or something that you're good at. And I thought to myself, well, okay, took a step back, and I looked at myself and thought, what am I good at? And I thought, well, bad, corny jokes and martial arts. But then I thought, well, I wouldn't say I'm good at martial arts, but I thought I enjoy martial arts. So I then said to myself, how about doing tuition videos, tutorials on YouTube? And at first I wasn't too big on it. I thought, well, people will laugh, people will leave snide comments, or, all this kind of stuff. You're typical YouTube kind of keyboard warriors. But another part of me said to myself, don't do it for other people. Do it for yourself. Upload a video of yourself doing a Poomsae, upload a video of yourself talking about the history of Korean martial arts, upload a video of myself doing maybe some very basic exercises, warm-up exercises, and just put it on YouTube. And I said, it doesn't matter if you get one hit. It doesn't matter if you get 100 hits. Like I said to myself, just do it for yourself and see how I feel. What do I get out of it? So I did. And the first video I uploaded was called Spar with Sam, because this was during the whole pandemic. So gyms were closed, dojangs were closed. So martial artists weren't getting around to doing sparring.
Right.
So I filmed myself, and when I look back on the video now, I cringe because I look like some sort of Bobo doll going from side to side. And it's literally called Spar with Sam, where the camera's filming me, and I'm literally doing these techniques and bobbing to the side. And I say to the camera, like, come on, can you hit me? Can you hit me? There, you got my head's over here. Can you hit me?
I love it.
I think it's still there.
It's a great concept.
Well, the thing is, it got hits.
Yeah.
No pun intended. People actually, they did tune in, and it went up. I think it stopped getting hits now. It's like 300 odd hits, but it got 300 hits in like the first month. And then suddenly YouTube pinged me one morning. It was like, oh, you've got 1 subscriber. And I thought to myself, I was like, wow. And part of me saw the jokey side of it. I was like, come on, 1 subscriber, that deserves a celebration. Let's go to the pub. But a serious side of me said to myself, all those doubts which I had, people are going to laugh, people are going to think it's stupid, or do it for yourself. And I thought, one person has seen this video and it's affected them. It's touched them.
And they want more.
Way. Yes. So the next video I did was like a couple of weeks later on. It's like Spar with Sam 2. And exactly the same. And I think I just had some corny music in the background or something like this, if I remember correctly. But long story short, gradually, the more videos I began to make, the subscriber count was gradually going up.
Mm-hmm.
And the channel, I then gradually started taking it a little bit more seriously and spending a bit more time on the editing, or I'd actually give videos title screens at the beginning, and then I'd give them like little ending screens at the end. Still very basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But gradually the subscriber base was building up and up and up. The video quality then started going towards a bit more tutorials. Now the channel now is mostly tutorials, exercises for various different types, like leg exercises or ab exercises, push-up exercises, Poomsae, showing a lot of Poomsae. The one thing that the channel seems to lack at the moment, though, is that I've got a lot of ideas for future videos, but they all require partners.
Yeah.
So there's only so much you can kind of do by yourself, and I do it as best as I can. I try to explain it as best as I can, but I think to myself, it would be so easier if I actually had like a uki that I could demonstrate on. And all the people I seem to ask, I think they think that I intend to beat them up, because I say to them like, oh, would you mind, are you free this weekend? Do you mind helping me out with one of my videos? And they're like, yeah, sure. What are we doing? And say, oh, I'd require you to stand there as I kick you like over the head. And if their faces drop and they're like, oh, sorry, I think I'm busy this weekend. Yeah, I'm washing my hair. But I mean, that's a work in progress in itself. And, I'm sure that will rectify in time. But in terms of actually the subscribers of the channel, I mean, again, this is going to sound like a very cliched, typical YouTuber, but the subscribers have really been what's made the channel. And as I said, like the beginning of describing my YouTube channel, it originally came around as a form of therapy to help with my depression. Because I basically just ran myself into the ground. This was purely kind of like almost my own personal therapy, with no real intention to actually get subscriber counts or anything. But some of the subscribers have come from, there was a Filipino man who now lives in California. Mm-hmm. And I haven't spoken to him for a while actually, but he was always so supportive, and he would always leave supportive comments. He, I think, did a lot of like Kali and Jeet Kune Do. Mm-hmm. So we're comparing a lot of methods and philosophies and theories. The young man who I described, who came down from sparring, he subscribed, and he's been like a strong pillar of support. I've got another subscriber who comes from Bristol, mm-hmm. in southwest England, and he's coming up actually this weekend, and we're having another challenge spar together. So, but it's been a very international, global network. But I suddenly get comments from people from like Australia, Canada, France, Norway, Japan, Korea. And it is actually so nice to think that, or to realize actually a lot of what I've done going into this forest. So I don't know if you've seen my videos on YouTube. Most of them are filmed in a forest. Mm-hmm. And doing tutorials in this forest, and then thinking people are watching this from half the world away, and they're actually enjoying it, and they're wanting to interact. And it is. I'm no figure of a lie. I'm not exaggerating at all, but it is actually so humbling. And I've always said to like the subscribers at the end, I've always said that, as long as you guys learn at least one thing from me, out of all these videos, if there's just one thing that one person can take away, I've done my job as an instructor. And yeah, I mean, I often end my videos as well with saying stuff like, stay safe, train hard, keep listening to insert band name here. And sometimes I mention these really obscure bands who I think to myself, nobody's going to know who that is. And then somebody will, in the comment section, will be like, somebody knows. And there was one band called Creator, and they're like this German thrash metal band. And I left a comment to somebody just saying, "Oh, keep listening to Creator because they're the best band around." And he left a comment back to that saying like, "Oh, I was listening to Creator the other day. I really like their album, blah blah blah, and all this kind of stuff." And I was like, "It's a small world. It really is.
It really is."
But they have been great. They really have. And sometimes I just think to myself, they make the channel, and especially when I see them interacting with each other as well, it's so nice to see that. I had a video on my channel about a year ago now. It's not on there anymore. But two guys got into a debate, and I was following this debate as it was going on. And both these people were actually quite strong in their personal opinions and what they thought about this particular video. But what got me is the fact that no time were they disrespectful to each other.
Oh, I love when that happens. It doesn't happen often, but I love seeing that. What to me is a true debate, not an argument.
Yeah. One thing I learned a long time ago was that, what was the quote now? Oh, yeah. The quote said, "Only idiots have arguments. Friends have debates." And like I said, I was just seeing how this debate was going on, and there was no name calling. There was no snideness. And they were saying stuff like, "Oh, I see what you're saying. However, have you considered?" And then the next person would say, "Yeah, you raise a good point. However, let me say," and this, and even it was really long. It just went on and on, this debate. And eventually I kind of stepped in and I just left a comment saying like, "Oh, guys, I've just been following this." And I actually said, it's actually so nice to see, because again, the typical kind of YouTube argument will just degenerate into name calling.
Right.
And I said, this is kind of what I want on my channel. What I'd like to see is healthy debate, no name calling, no snidiness or anything like this, just healthy debate, because we don't necessarily have to agree with somebody else's opinion, but we can still show that opinion respect.
And you fostered that. You set the tone for that with the content that you were putting up on your channel and the people you were attracting and how you were engaging with them. So I hope you take some credit for it, at least.
I like to think so. It definitely takes two to tango. But I have drawn on my channel before in the past, the odd like negative comment here and there, stuff like that. But luckily that's extremely rare, and I haven't had any comments like that for a very, very long time.
Good.
Because I don't personally, I don't get drawn into those kind of things. Yeah. If I see a comment and I look at it and think I can see it's just trying to get under my skin, I think I'm just going to delete this. I'm not even going to bother replying.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
If someone's going to be offensive, they don't need to be part of our community. That's not what we're about.
Yeah, most exactly so. There are plenty of other YouTube channels that they can feel free to go and express their views. But I often think to myself that even with that kind of stuff, I don't let it get to me personally, because I think if they've done it to me, they leave a comment on my channel, they probably left 100 comments on 100 other channels, and they'll continue to leave comments on 100 more channels. But no, it's always the positive comments always make the day, most definitely. And if any subscribers of mine are watching, I did kind of like mention out there, but all I got was a bit of as a response. But if any of them are actually going to be watching, then I do genuinely feel it. It really is. It's a small channel, but it's got a big heart, I like to think.
Good. How can people engage with you beyond YouTube? Do you have other social media, a website, or anything like that would be relevant?
I used to have a Facebook. I'm currently actually taking a break from Facebook. Okay. That's a decision both me and my partner, my wife. We went on our honeymoon, belated honeymoon, quite recently, actually. We got married during the pandemic, and we weren't able to go on our honeymoon as a result of continuous lockdowns. So we went on a honeymoon quite recently, but we decided to turn our Facebooks off whilst we're on our honeymoon. And we actually found ourselves not really missing that sort of like internet sort of thing.
Sure. I understand.
And since we've been back, it's kind of been a bit like, do we kind of need to go back onto Facebook yet? Which I will go back onto Facebook eventually. But at this time being, I'm just kind of enjoying a little bit of the Facebook isolation, whatever you want to call it, withdrawal, maybe. But the YouTube is definitely there. all comments I do reply to, notwithstanding the comments we've just mentioned. But if anybody wants to drop a message on any of the videos, suggestions, if somebody would say, oh, are you familiar with X, Y, and Z topic? Would you be able to maybe do a video about it? If so, even if somebody just wants to say something like, hi, like the content, I'll always make time to reply, because the way I see it is that somebody has taken the time to visit the channel. Somebody's taken the time to watch a video, which they don't have to watch. There's so many other videos they can watch. And sometimes when I compare my videos to other YouTube channels, I think, wow, they've got a gym. They've got a fancy intro screen. They've got fancy, snazzy music. I've just got a muddy field in a forest. But the fact they've chosen to watch mine as well as maybe another one, I look at it and think the least I can do is actually say thanks and reply to a comment that they leave. So all comments on my YouTube will be answered, and I'll try and do that ASAP. If not, then, just feel free to give me a nudge or a boy, you said you'd reply, and I'll say sorry, and I will.
I love it. Well, Sam, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation, but it's time to wrap. So how do you want to end? What are your final words to everybody?
Well, first and foremost, I'll say thank you to yourself and Andy once again for this amazing opportunity. Like I said, from starting out my YouTube channel at the beginning, just as like a personal therapy, I honestly wouldn't have. If somebody said you'll be on a podcast talking to somebody who runs like a well-respected martial arts network, I'd probably have been said like, yeah, whatever, and pull the other one. But no, thank you so much. And it's always nice to actually talk to like-minded martial artists and generally cool people like yourselves. And to the viewers who are watching this, stay safe, train hard, and keep listening to Iron Maiden, because they're the best band around.
When I listen to Sam's story, one of the things that sticks out most for me is how open he is about learning and improving and just being a better version of Sam. We heard it as he talked about things that he did that maybe he wouldn't do now. We heard it when he talked about training in Kyokushin when he really didn't know that much Kyokushin, but he wasn't willing to quit. And all of this says so much about his character. But of course, I'm not surprised, because this is what martial arts does for us. It makes us better. So Sam, thanks for coming on the show. Listeners, I hope you check out his YouTube channel. There's a lot of great stuff over there. If you want the show notes, all the stuff that we've got related to this episode, go to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. You're going to find videos and links and social media and pictures and all kinds of good stuff, not just for this episode, but for everyone we've ever made. Some podcasts put stuff behind a paywall. We don't do that. You get access to everything we've ever done. If you're down to support us in all of our work, you have a few options. You might consider buying one of our Amazon books, maybe telling others about the show, this episode perhaps, or supporting our Patreon. If you want to bring me into your school for a seminar, I'd love to join you. Reach out. We'll find a way to make that happen. And don't forget, we've got that code podcast15 gets you 15% on all the stuff that we sell at whistlekick.com. Now, if you've got topic or guest suggestions, feedback, any good stuff like that, I want to hear it. Email me, jeremy@whistlekick.com. Our social media, it's @whistlekick, and that takes us to the end. So until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.